ever wondered who would win in a fight between Yoriichi and all 9 Hashiras together? Most of you might conclude that the Hashiras, even after joining forces, are no match for the insanely powerful Yoriichi, but that might not be the case. Sure, Yoriichi defeated the terrifying Muzan rather quickly, but we still have to consider that he too can be hurt. If you recall the battle, Yoriichi was a bit nervous to face Muzan because he knew that a single well-timed hit could finish him. That's one point. Another is that facing a single opponent is not the same as fighting several ones simultaneously. In this situation, Yoriichi would have to deal with several attacks from different enemies at the same time, and that's a different ballgame, even though they aren't as powerful as Muzan individually. He'd also have to counter all their unique breathing styles and attacks. Of course, Yoriichi possesses the sun breathing style, which is undoubtedly the most powerful method and has proven to be especially devastating to demons since their natural weakness is the sun. However, this technique has never been used on humans, so we can't be sure how effective it is on them. It's been established that Yoriichi is the most powerful demon slayer in history, but there are some Hashiras in this generation that possess unique skills. These special tricks and powers might probably give them a chance to take the demon slayer on for at least long enough for the others to deliver some deadly blows. First on the list is Shinobu, who has a very lethal skill that could pose a threat to Yoriichi, which is poison. Over time, it's become clear that Shinobu is a master of poisons. We have seen her use her special concoctions to annihilate demons in the past. She once helped cure zenitsu of a deadly demon poison and also developed a special toxin, particularly to deplete Muzan's strength. That being said, it is safe to say that in a battle against Yoriichi, Shinobu would create a poison that could severely hurt the swordsman. However, to administer the poison, she would have to get close enough to him, which would be impossible on her own because he would kill her before she gets to him. Nevertheless, this deadly skill would prove vital in a fight where all the Hashiras join forces against him. The next Hashira that could pose a threat is the eccentric Tengen Uzui, the current sound Hashira. Although he's large and muscular with incredible strength, that's not the unique feature he brings to the table in this scenario. Unlike most other Hashira and demon slayers, Tengen carries a lot of gear, including special weapons and bombs for range attacks. In the Entertainment District story arc, Tengen is depicted as a master of weapons, and this kind of unique trait is very much needed in a battle against someone like Yoriichi, especially because he's unfamiliar with such gadgets. They may do little harm to the Demon Slayer, but they could also create a window of opportunity for the other Hashira to join in the attack and probably overpower him. We have seen 2 Hashiras with unique offensive traits, but that's not enough, because Yoriichi is a formidable attacker, so they would also need some sort of defense against his onslaughts. That brings us to the next Hashira on the list, Giyu. So, what defensive abilities can he provide to give the Hashiras an edge? Well, first of all, earlier in the series, Giyu was shown using an incredible 11th form water breathing technique. This particular move was created by Giyu, and it has never been repeated by any other Hashira. This implies that Yoriichi would be completely unfamiliar with the unexpected move, which could potentially protect the Hashiras from some powerful blows. However, the all-powerful Demon Slayer would quickly find a way to get around the barrier, which isn't foolproof, but either way, it could be an advantage. Another thing worth mentioning about Giyu is that his breathing form is based on water, and since that's the natural enemy of fire, which Yoriichi's technique is based on, it could potentially extinguish his attacks. Obanai Iguro is a Hashira also worth mentioning here, basically because although Giyu is a formidable opponent, Obanai managed to last longer than him in the fight against Muzan, so hopefully his endurance and perception abilities come in handy in their battle against Yoriichi as well. Another Hashira to make the list is Gyomei. Although he was born blind, he managed to heighten his other senses, which gave him a more solid connection to the earth and also made him the strongest out of all the Hashiras. From selfless state to the Demon Slayer mark to the transparent world, Gyomei unlocked all the abilities a Demon Slayer can possess. With that fact being established, he's most likely the only Hashira that can go toe-to-toe with Yoriichi. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean he would win, but while he's engaging the most powerful Demon Slayer, the other Hashiras would be able to get in some pretty solid hits. Another fact that needs to be considered is that in Yoriichi's era, there were only the sun, water, moon, flame, thunder, stone, and wind breathing styles, which means that there are many other techniques he has no idea about. These breathing styles he's unfamiliar with, like mist, sound, love, and serpent, would most likely do some damage because he wouldn't know how to counter them. He also wouldn't know how to counter the whip-like sword technique Mitsuri uses. Finally, we have two Hashira, Sanemi and Rengoku, who honestly doesn't have any unique attributes that could make a significant difference in the fight against Yoriichi. Regardless, their input would still be required to give the Hashiras a fighting chance. Setting aside their lack of special traits, Rengoku and Sanemi are incredible fighters who possess some of the heaviest hits among all the Hashiras. Their impressive offensive abilities could prove very vital in the fight against Yoriichi, because with the right opportunity, they will land some deadly blows that would do some serious damage. Now that we have talked about the different advantages the Hashira possess that could change the outcome of a seemingly decided result, it's time to answer the big question. Would all Hashira together be able to take down the most powerful demon slayer in existence, Yoriichi Sugikuni? To answer this question, we'll have to assume that all fighters are in their prime, and that includes Yoriichi. In this situation, Rengoku and Tengen are assumed to still be members of the core, while other Hashira would be as strong as they were in the Infinity Castle story arc, meaning that they would have their Demon Slayer marks and all the powerful abilities they possessed at the time. Now it's time to get into the fight. Using all the aforementioned special skills and techniques, the Hashiras begin the fight against Yoriichi. Knowing how powerful he is, they wouldn't waste any time and would charge at him. In this scenario, Yoriichi would attempt to attack them, but just then, Tengen would use his smoke bombs as a surprise attack to distract him. This cheeky move would give the Hashiras an opening to surround him, with the hopes of overwhelming him with simultaneous attacks. As the smoke clears, Yoriichi would see the situation and probably attack them, since he is too phenomenal at close combat battles. However, just like earlier mentioned, Yoriichi isn't invincible, so that means that in this situation, he's also vulnerable to all unique breathing style attacks. A direct hit could finish him, so he would also need to do some defensive work. As the fight continues, the Hashiras would most likely attack first, using their different breathing styles, but just as they do, Yoriichi immediately activates his sun breathing ranging attack, which instantly blows all the Hashiras away. Now, Yoriichi has more space and time to deal with his opponents, and the tremendous blast would also send some fear into the minds of the Hashiras, ultimately affecting their mentality as the fight continues. Seeing the path the fight is taking, the more powerful Hashiras would enter the transparent world to see and predict Yoriichi's movements, while the others would prepare to engage. After using these skills, they would instantly charge at Yoriichi again, hoping to end the fight as quickly as possible. Now, the greatest Demon Slayer would be faced with 9 different loaded attacks from the Hashiras. But this is the same guy who obliterated the notorious Muzan in a matter of moments. The same guy who mastered all 12 sun breathing styles. Seeing their attacks, Yoriichi would probably react with blistering speed, using a technique sun breathing style to counter each Hashira's attacks. This devastating counterattack would leave the Hashiras severely injured, and to some, this would be game over. However, they wouldn't go down so easily. They would live up to their status as Hashiras and push themselves to the peak of their powers. As they get back up, they realized that unplanned attacks wouldn't work on Yoriichi, so they applied a more strategic approach. For the next attack, Gyu would most likely take the lead, using his water breathing as a defensive shield, while Obenai would follow with his perception abilities to guide the team and avoid Yoriichi's attacks. Behind them, Muichiro would use the mist breathing technique to create a thick fog that would impair Yoriichi's vision for a few moments. With a plan in motion, all other Hashiras would quickly follow behind, ready to unleash a barrage of attack as soon as the window of opportunity opens. Obviously, Yoriichi wouldn't stand around waiting for these attacks, so he too would go on the offensive, activating his sun breathing abilities again. However, this time, Gyu uses his 11th form water breathing technique to block the attacks and buy the others some time. It's important to remember that this shield isn't impenetrable, and so it wouldn't take more than a few seconds for Yoriichi to eventually break through the barrier with his overwhelming power. But that's just the first line of defense, because immediately after defeating Gyu, Muichiro takes his final form, creating a very thick mist, virtually rendering Yoriichi blind for a split moment. With a window of opportunity finally open, all the remaining Hashiras would follow and unleash their most powerful attacks on the sun-breathing master to kill him in his vulnerable state. At this point, Yoriichi would use the transparent world to see them, and then send his insanely powerful 13th form sun-breathing technique to counter all the Hashira's attacks. The clash of all the mighty attacks would cause a massive explosion, obliterating everything around them. After the dust settles, all 9 Hashiras would be seen dead from the explosion of insane magnitudes, while the greatest demon slayer to ever walk the earth would be severely wounded but still alive. So, even after using all their strongest attacks, the mightiest Hashiras of this current generation truly were no match for the ferocious Yoriichi.